Welcome to Machine Tool Maniacs, the podcast where machining, fabrication, entrepreneurship, and bringing ideas to life collide. Around here, every story is a success story. I'm Matt, a second-generation manufacturer who's been in the shop since I was in diapers, learning the tools, the trade, and the people behind it all. Nearly everything in our daily lives is passed through a CNC machine. And we're here to spotlight the makers turning raw material into reality. Whether you're dreaming big or building bigger, this is your inside track to making it happen. Welcome back to the show. Today we're diving into the story of a small shop in North Salt Lake called O.P.A Industries. I'm joined by Brady Pickett, the founder of O.P.A. Brady's journey is a great example of what it really takes to step out on your own in this trade. From his background leading up to starting his shop, to the decisions behind his first machines, the progress he's made, the challenges of growing a business, this episode is packed with insights for anyone who's thinking about starting a shop or just curious about the path. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Brady.
Hi, I'm Brady Pickett, and I'm the owner, although I say general manager all the time, of O.P.A Industries. And we're actually in Woods Cross, although North Salt Lake, it's all a hodgepodge over here. But yeah, we're technically in Woods Cross, Utah.
No, okay, mishmash.
Yeah, if you go one block over, you're in a different city. You go another block the other way, you're in another city. So yeah, it's all close by.
Woods Cross.
Yep.
Well, give us introduce yourself. Give us a quick background on where you got your start in this industry.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say I've been a machinist now. 20 plus years. I started when I was in high school. Through the vocational school. They had an annex at my high school. And I kind of fell right into that. And then yeah, I've worked at about 7 or 8 different machine shops. From the grunt that sweeps the floors all the way up to shop manager. I've also worked as an applications engineer for a tool supply company for a while. And yeah, my background is in engineering and machining. And yeah, I don't know if that's a quick enough. We can dig in more, I guess, as we
Yeah,
go.
well, actually, I didn't know you were an applications engineer. Who was that
Yeah,
for?
for ATS, they got bought up by MSC, so they were I think the biggest, cutting tool and support company in Salt Lake for a long time.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so I went there, and I mean, it was different. I really enjoyed going into it. It was a great experience for me to later start my own shop because
Mhm.
I got to go into, not to name drop too many, but like big companies, nationally known companies. Like if you have an O-ring on your car, I've probably been in the factory that made it, kind of deal. That kind of level of stuff. To
Oh
see
yeah.
everything from those really high end, aerospace companies and how they do business, medical companies, all the way down to like the mom and pop shops. And so I was only there for about a year, but it gave me a lot of insight into kind of the good and the bad, and it helped me see where the grass was really greener, kind of deal. And that it really informed a lot of how I shape my own shop down the road.
I share that same sentiment.
Yeah.
I'm an applications engineer as well. Not for I've always joked, I don't think I could ever be in on the tooling side. For some odd reason, tooling just does not interest me. I would rather
Oh
just
yeah.
tap a tooling guy and be like, "Hey, come help me."
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it was a lot of fun, and it's a lot of problem solving. I would usually get called in when the salesman had been like, "Hey, the papers say that we should choose this cutter form,"
hmm,
and then they go to use it and it would snap or something be wrong or there'd be chatter or whatever it might, they'd follow the recommendations in the Kennametal book or, whatever company we were running their tooling. And
mhm.
then I usually got called in at that point to be more the hands on. And it's like, well, let's slow it down. Let's speed it up. Let's try this. And so, yeah, I did not like what I was doing necessarily. Like I don't, it was too close to sales for me. That just didn't work very well.
Mhm.
But it was just an amazing experience as far as, gaining knowledge and seeing the world out there.
Yeah, getting to meet people.
Yeah.
see the different way things are done. You learn pretty quick. It humbles you,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
It's easy to get in your own head when you're in the same shop all the time. And once you get out there and you start visiting a lot of shops, you're like, man, there's a lot of very smart people out there doing really cool, interesting things,
Yeah.
right?
And just the diversity of customers and, the work that's being done. And I mean, machines, especially in the Salt Lake Valley and Utah in general, we range all over the place. There's firearms manufacturing, there's oil and gas, work being done. There's tons of aerospace, tons of
Hmm.
space, rockets, ATK Thiokals up here. They put every rocket booster on pretty much every U.S. rocket for decades now, and everything in between. So it's a real diversity of work. Whereas I've been in other places that are a lot more specialized. Like I remember going down to the opening of a machine tool company down in Texas, and it was like 100% pipes. It was all oil and gas. That's what every machine shop cut that. And when that dipped a little bit, every machine shop dipped. And when it was flying high, everyone was flying high. But Utah really has a diversity of industries.
Yeah, for sure. And what maybe some of the listeners don't know is that ATK Thiokol built it's part of Northrop Grumman now, but they built the two boosters that were on either side of that big orange tank that sat on the bottom of the space shuttle. So that's kind of
Well,
what
and they
they're
still
famous
they
for.
still do solid rocket motors for almost everything. I know that they're involved in a lot of stuff. I've known a lot of the engineers that have dealt with them, and there's a variety of products that they work on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, cool. So what inspired you to set out on your own and start your own shop?
I would say initially, so I should be very clear that it's like where I currently am at O.P.A. There's been a handful of iterations and reinventions and things like that. It definitely wasn't. I started O.P.A. I started out on my own, on X date, and it's a nice straight line. There were a lot of false starts. There were a lot of changes of plans and things like that. I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand about self-employment is it's like you'll probably fail, at least once and have to learn from that and go back to the drawing board. But I initially set out on my own, kind of by I don't want to say by force. I was working for a company. When I was younger, I was very much drawn towards chaotic companies. Because it becomes a meritocracy when you work at a company that's in dire straits. Like they stop caring about how old you are, what your background might be, who like how well you play golf with the owner. Like they don't care about any of that stuff anymore. And it
Yeah.
purely becomes who can get the job done better than anybody else. And I was drawn to that, especially as a young guy who really struggled. Like I've worked in Indiana where we had a very rigid union rules, and it was very clear that it's like, oh no, you fall here in the hierarchy, and no matter if you're better or worse, this guy who's been doing it for 17 years versus you who's been doing it for 5, he like we rank him higher no matter what. And I got really frustrated with that, and so I was always drawn to meritocracies. And so I was working at one where they had kind of tasked me. They were an in-house shop. They only did their own stuff. They had tasked me with like building out the job shop portion, and they're like, hey, fill our machines up, stuff like that. And so I had been doing that for about 6 months as they started kind of winding down and getting into trouble. And so when the day finally came that the owner was like, okay, I'm done, I'm not paying any more money, um I felt like we had a really good place. And then on top of that, they had about 4 Haas CNC machines, pretty simple. Like a couple were just tool room machines, but they were decent. um Many people will know that, especially with Haas and other entry level machine companies, you typically lease your equipment with a $1 buyout at the end of the lease. So you really don't have any equity in the machines until the very last day of the lease. And that protects the lender because they can just come in, and it's easier to foreclose when it's a lease versus an amortized, piece of equipment. So they did that. And so basically the owner was like, well, I'm not going to make the payment anymore. They'd already paid on these machines for years. I mean, they were like 75% through owning these machines. And I told the owner, I was like, you need to buy these and then you can sell them privately. Like, I know it sounds backwards, but it's like, dude, drop $70,000 to pay off these machines and then go sell them for 180 or whatever, like whatever it might have been.
Yeah.
And he was just adamant that he's like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. It's as messy. He was kind of that company was a side kind of a distraction for him. He made his money elsewhere. And so I stepped in and I was like, the logic, I can't turn my back on how logical that is, to turn your back on those machines. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I went and I mean, begged, borrowed, and stole anything I could to put together enough to pay off the machines. Pause would not let us just roll over the lease to like my name or anything. We had to pay him off, and I mean, it really took some doing. But I managed to do that, and so I took those machines, and that was kind of the genesis of me being on my own. Now, I later sold that whole shop, lock, stock, and barrel, to all that equipment to another company, and that company, that when I started out on my own, it was not O.P.A Industries. I did that on my own, and I just kind of felt like I couldn't turn my back on that opportunity. But I was not near ready for where to find customers, how to find work, how to keep those machines fed. I did not know what I was doing. Oh man, I think I was about 24 at the time when I did it. I had only worked for two other shops at that point, and yeah, very, very, very
Trial.
novice, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Trial by fire.
exactly. And luckily I've always been kind of a hard worker, and so I put in the hours and that offset a lot of the issues. And at the end of the day, I sold all the equipment for a decent profit, all said and done. I would say I at least broke even on the deal. And it was a great learning opportunity. But from a starting a business standpoint, it failed at the end of the day. I mean, like that company, I closed it down. Like, and I didn't have it anymore, and went and did some other things, was a partner in different shops, and came around and then started O.P.A in 2013 with a couple partners.
Hmm.
And that's what's kind of carried over, but once again, there's been reinventions that whole time. So
So
yeah.
what had you convinced the second time around going back into ownership that
Oh,
you could be successful?
yeah. So the I worked for after I sold my machines, I went out to the Midwest, and I worked at a machine shop out there that I was working, kind of a partnership there. And so I really got to run it at a high level, and it was a much bigger machine shop than I'd ever been in. And that was unique just because it was such a different world. So I got that experience. The owner of that company also, he had been, I don't even know what his role was, but he was like the number two or number three accountant underneath the CFO at Ford Motor Company for like 2 decades. So like
Hmm.
the dude came from like a different level of the business world.
Yeah.
And he ran this machine shop, and I basically got to shadow him. I was his right hand man in everything. And the idea was I was learning the ropes to take over, kind of deal. And that was a great experience. And that really kind of helped correct a lot of the things that I was like, oh, that's what I was doing wrong. Oh, that's what I should have been doing differently. And so then when I cashed out there and came back to Utah, I was wrapping up my engineering up at the U and kind of just piddle farting around a little bit, and
Hmm.
then kind of got pulled back into machining, just as a like a, oh, do this on the side, they need some help part-time, we know this shop that's struggling. And I once again, I fell into another chaotic shop where I was able to rise very quickly through the ranks. And that shop in particular was military, heavy military. Like everything we did was DLA or Navy. We did sub safe work. And that's where I really learned. Like I learned what AS 9100 was. I wrote their quality manual. I learned how to deal with the government, like how to deal with the inspectors and stuff like that. And that once again just was a completely different view from I had been looking at, I've been working in these little job shops or, smaller in-house shops and stuff like that. And to suddenly be like, dealing with mil spec and dealing with just, I mean, it was a whole new world again. And so I kind of felt like, so that we were working, my two partners and I that started O.P.A, we were working at that company. And once again, we could see the writing on the wall. I don't know if the owners could, but we could see that it was going under pretty darn fast. And so we were kind of putting our ducks in a row for when the day finally came. And sure enough, like they downsized, and then finally one Wednesday they came and they said, we can't pay you guys anymore, and we
Wow.
were just like, okay, cool. And at that point, I just felt really a lot more comfortable with like what was out there, that it's like, man, we could do military work, we could do, firearm work because we had all come from the firearm background. We could do job shop work. I felt like I had seen a lot more of it. And honestly, this is gonna sound, and it is, I mean, it is, very, I guess, narcissistic or that, but it's like I knew I could do it better than a lot of than what, like, I knew I could have make better choices than what I had seen being made in other companies. So that's kind of where it came from. And having done it on my own and kind of failed, I wanted to try it with partners. I think that bringing on partners was definitely for me kind of the grass must be greener on the other side. Like I struggled. Like maybe the reason I failed was because I was doing it alone. And so
Mhm.
maybe I need partners this go around. And, that had mixed results. I think that both my partners moved on to bigger and better things. One of the divorces was pretty amicable. One was less so, but I think he's in a much better, I think both of them are in better places that suit them a lot better. And so having seen like, okay, I did it solo, I did it with partners. This go around, I decided I'm sticking by myself, and that suits my personality a little bit better.
Got it. A couple interesting lessons in so far in this conversation, I think, that are good takeaways, maybe for individuals that are just, you know, getting into the industry or kind of finding themselves stagnant. Maybe look for those shops that are a little more chaotic, go get a job there. And like you said, you do have a better chance of, if you truly are talented, of rising to the top and not getting stuck in some sort of bureaucracy. You get into these situations where it is more of a meritocracy. So I really like that you brought that up because I think that's useful. And I've
Yeah, and I
often
would.
said
Oh, sorry.
I've often said that I think early on in this career, your best path is to gain experience. Chase
Yes.
experience, don't chase money because the money will come with the experience. So if you try to go into a big shop right in the beginning that's bureaucratic or has, a lot of um, like a union shop,
Yeah.
you can find yourself just stuck and not learning. And then yeah, you may have got more money at the time, but that's going to doom you down the road because
Well,
you're
and
not
I would add to that just a little bit too. I think that I know I was in this boat, and I think a lot of young people are, especially people that are motivated to be self-employed. They want to get out. They view kind of every month that they're not running their own business is like a loss to them, and I think that's the wrong mentality. And so many people want to get out there. Oh, I'm 21, 22, 23, and I want to run my own business. I want to be my own boss, stuff like that. And I get where they're coming from. I think I was in that exact same boat to some degree. But I cannot stress the value of that experience. And I think you're exactly right that like you want to sometimes spend a little bit of time in bad situations. Every shop that I've worked for, I've learned a lot from that shop. It might be what not to do ever, but I learned it, and it is always better to learn lessons on someone else's time and their dime, their money and their time rather than on your own.
yeah.
And so it's like that's the time where you snap tools because you push the envelope and you figure out where the edge of that envelope is, or
Mhm.
you try new systems, try a different CAD system, try a different CAM system, whatever it might be, because your boss is paying for it or the corporation's paying for it. And you can dig through all that so that when you're ready to finally pull the trigger on your own, you're a pro at it. You know what's going on. And I think that that's one of the things that really gets overlooked is people are just so eager to get out there and like, oh, I need to start my own company. I need to get going now. And they totally miss the value of working for a lot of places. And I would add to it too, the chaotic places are great. And I would really tell people, and I tell people this in any industry. I think a lot of people, the reason they're fed up with their jobs is they're fed up with a huge corporation where the decisions are being made very far away from the actual problem. And I totally get that. Try to work in shops that are small to medium size where the owner, maybe you're working next to him. Especially small shops are cool because they offer more of an opportunity to become a bit of a renaissance man. And like, I mean, a lot of places I work, I go to the bookkeeper and be like, hey, can you teach me how QuickBooks works? Or can you teach me how our inventory, what is Fishbowl inventory system? Help me learn that. And in a smaller company, they value that. They want you. They're like, oh yeah, hey, if you got some bandwidth, man, go over there and learn how to do the administrative side. Or hey, can you come up and repair something, help install a machine? That's more likely to happen in a small company versus like if you work for if you work for Boeing, they're never going to let their machinists, rig a machine and drop it on the floor. They're not going to let their machinists go in and learn how to do the bookkeeping and how to invoice a customer. But all those things in a small company, um, when you start running your own company, that stuff's invaluable. Like knowing how to do the administrative, knowing how to do the HR, that's great. And that only really comes working in a small company.
Well, not only that, but I think with machining, especially the small shops are, for the most part, I'm not going to say there's not examples out there, but they are just, they have the ability to be so much more efficient
Yeah.
and just move. You get into these big shops and there's five managers for every one person that's actually doing work, and it's just so bogged down. And
Hmm.
we got to have meetings about a meeting, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think for machining in particular, there's still a lot of room for small shops to be very successful and compete.
Oh yeah.
So
I'd say there's more room. I mean, I really think I think there's a dire need for small shops.
absolutely.
I might be a little biased though.
So what machines then did you start with at
Oh boy.
this second O.P.A, I guess, or
I
the
mean,
current iteration?
originally, yeah, I had gotten the Haws my first go around. I sold all those. The second go around, man, I don't know how to even describe them. Like everyone else's garbage, basically. Like whoever was throwing out a machine, if I could get there fast enough and drag it off from behind their shop before the scrap metal guys came, that's what I started.
So all
We
used
really
stuff.
bootstrapped it. Yeah, we really bootstrapped it. Our very first one that was like I would call it my workhorse. That I mean it, man, it outlived its life by a long while. Was a 19, I want to say 96. So we started O.P.A in 2013. So at this point, it was coming up on 20 years old. It was a
Mhm.
Hardinge um, Conquest Mill with a Fanic. I think it had a Fanic 16M controller. So very basic. It was the green and black screen. We had to,
Mhm.
everything was RS-232. It didn't even have a floppy disk drive. I mean, it was pre that. I think it might have had a paper tape reader attached to it still. So very old
Wow.
school.
Yeah.
Could not run much, but man, that thing held tolerances. It was good iron, for sure. But like I was in that thing almost every Saturday, like swapping out an air solenoid or changing a hall sensor, a proxy sensor, or cleaning something off, or whatever it might be. That thing needed so much love on a regular basis. It was not reliable. It would break down at the least opportune moments. But once again, like that all fed into, thank goodness, I'd worked in companies where I was forced to do the repairs on my own machine because I felt more comfortable doing that.
Hmm.
So that was kind of our first one, and that really launched us. But we'd take anything. I remember we had an open Miltronics for a while that didn't even have, guards on it. And like we had to use a misting coolant system because it would just go everywhere and chips would, whip me in the face all the time when I was running it. Just all sorts of stuff. And then we caught a big break. There was a company up in Idaho, um, well known. If I were to say the name, everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, I know that." And they did semiconductor work, and they had two prototype Akumas um, in their shop that had like maybe 2,000 hours on them. I mean, they were older Akumas. I think one was an '04 and one was an '06 mills. And luckily, our salesman, that we built relationships with, we always told our salesman, "Hey, if you hear of a good deal, of a cheap older machine, we're not afraid of them. Call us." And he reached out to me and he's like, "I found your machines, man. Like I can work you a deal." And it was a big company that we bought them from, who they were basically just writing them off. They were just like, "Hey, we're done. We're getting new equipment. We have to move this out. What's scrap metal value of them basically?" And we swooped up there and snagged them. And the riggers, I remember the riggers did us a favor because that was my biggest panic. Was I was like, "How am I going to pay to rig machines from Idaho
Hmm.
down to Salt Lake?"
Yeah.
And luckily, the our neighborhood riggers, who are just through the block from me, and I've used for everything, they were like, "Well, hey, we actually found out we're going to deliver the new machines to them, and we'll just haul yours down. Like, don't worry about it." And I think
Oh, no
they
way.
charged me like $500 to rig two very heavy machines all the way down, and that was a lifesaver. And I think I've paid them back multiple times over by now. But like they helped us out, and just kind of everyone did. Everyone, all of our salesmen, all of our vendors, everyone kind of knew we were startups, and we were trying our best, and they were all really good to us, and I tried to. That's why I've kind of stuck with Akuma, like not to poo poo on any other brands, but like our Akuma salesmen were there for us, and I'd like to buy as much as I can from them to kind of repay the time and effort they put into us,
Mm.
when
Akuma,
we were nothing.
as you know, I mean, Akuma's good iron for the money. It's very reliable. So were those VMC 4020s? Is that what those were?
Yeah, so one was it was they called it the Crown, but it was the kind of the spin-off of the 4020, and then one was an MB56, I want to say,
Oh
which
wow,
was
that's a
the
nice one.
predecessor. Yeah, it was definitely a heavy duty, and that one was older, and its spindle ended up seizing on me. But it was both of them that definitely took the shop to a different level because they were 12,000 RPM spindles versus I think I was at 7,500 or 8,000 on the hard hinge, and that was definitely a big step up. The controllers were a lot nicer. I mean, even though they were old, they still had like the high cut in them, and they had some cool stuff that really made a difference. So that was kind of a big step in the right direction. And then kind of fast forwarding, I had different machines. I've done Doosan or DN Solutions, whatever you want to call them nowadays. And I've had a few Haws here and there. About a year and a half ago, I kind of sat down and did kind of another reinvention where I kind of swapped the direction of my shop, got rid of a lot of my older machines, and kind of decided to go with fewer but newer machines. Was kind of my whole concept on that, and
Hmm.
ended up with. I mean, you've seen the shop. It's mostly Akumas. My lathe is a Doosan Lynx LSYB, and I do have a Haas Super Mini Mill. Which for what Haas is, that super mini mill, that the redesign they did on it has really impressed me. And
Yeah,
that was when I
I
just
like
kind of,
those.
yeah, and I needed a second spindle fast, basically. Like I was waiting for the Akumas to come in, and I needed something to just make chips, and Haas was right there. So yeah, I mean, I I think I'd be very happy with almost any brand of CNC machine. So I definitely don't want to, like I said, I don't want to poo poo any other brands. But I love Akumas, and I love the OSP controller in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think all machines have a place. I mean, just like cars,
Yes, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Some people need a truck, some people need a race car.
Yep. And I mean, I've run, in the different shops I've worked. I actually started in Mazax. I ran almost exclusively Mazax, like the Intercrex and the PFH 5800 for a long time. And like even up through when I was in Indiana, like we had nothing but quick turn lathes and horizontals and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I really liked Mazac. But like I said, it was, our salesman that kind of happened to be at the right place at the right time were the Hartwig guys that rep Akuma. And
Mhm.
that's just kind of what we fell into. But I think you're absolutely right. I think I could have got DMGs or Mori at the time. I could have gotten Mazax. I could have gotten Akuma. Any of them, would have served me just fine. And I'd be raving about them right now.
Yeah, and the more of these episodes I do, the more I think your arc is probably the way to go. Start out with used machines.
Oh yeah.
Um, I've had other episodes where we talk about watching out for what you're getting used, but
Hmm.
it seems like it's the better route as opposed to putting yourself into a position where you're forced to make a payment on a machine on top of probably paying for shop space and all the other
Yeah.
ancillary items you got to pay for. It really seems like the way to go is to start with used stuff and just keep it simple and then upgrade when you can, when it makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's what's kind of nice, especially if you grab your stuff from bigger companies. Like they want everything to be super reliable. So like the minute that a solenoid starts going or a sensor starts going or there's something just quirky with the machine, they want to toss it to the curb. And so there's a lot of opportunity for a guy who's not afraid to be like, hey, eventually that tool changer is going to jam and I'm going to have to figure it out. If you're open to that kind of stuff, man, there are bargains just left and right for that kind of thing right now.
Yeah.
And I would definitely recommend it to people. It's like spend a little bit of time learning. I mean, that's what's cool about machines is at the end of the day, they're just a collection of mechanical, hydraulic, electrical, and pneumatic systems put together. It's just different variations on that. And so if you can kind of learn the basic stuff of like, here's how I check sensors, learn how to use a good multimeter and learn how to, how your airlines work and stuff like that. You should be able to work on most machines pretty easily for at least the basic stuff. And I think it's worth putting a little bit of time in learning that and becoming a bit of a machine repairman um, in order to get some good deals and take those baby steps rather than jumping right into it.
That's good advice. So what were some of your first customers or your first jobs? Like how did you get this thing
Oh
rolling?
boy. So really like originally when I first broke out, I tried so I had a couple that I had kind of cultivated to be a job shop customer for my existing employer and then, when they went under, I reached out and was like, "Hey, just so you know, I took the machines, I'm doing that." I picked up a couple that way. Um just word of mouth. And kind of shared contacts. I mean, you got to remember too that company went away, so there was never like a any sort of like non compete clause or anything. Like they no longer existed, so
Uh-huh.
their
Yeah.
customers were looking. I think it might have been tougher had I left the company and was trying to poach customers. That would have been a different story as far as the difficulty level. But where it was kind of just a transition, it wasn't quite as bad. I actually tried very early on. I don't know if you remember, but there was a website called MFG.com that was kind of a forerunner to the online platform concept where they didn't really do a lot other than they were just hosting the platform that brought customers and machine shops together. It was kind of a weird. I didn't really care for it. Like as the shop, I had to pay money every month to use it. I never felt like I got a great turnaround, and there were like a lot of loopholes where you could um once you met up on the site, then you could like work directly with each other. So I did pick up a couple customers who like I did a really crappy job for them. Not sorry, I did a good job, but their job was just crappy, not good money or anything. But then they would call me directly on the next one and be like, "Oh, hey, you cut this last part for us." Picked up a couple that way.
Uh-huh.
But really, initially, I struggled to find work. Like that was definitely like my biggest headache and what kept me up at night was where do I find work? And I reached out to other machine shops. The shops, where I had worked and like kind of my mentor, where I consider it my apprenticeship, but when I was in high school, I worked for him. I talked to him and be like, "Hey, kick me anything you can." He was really good about helping me out with, any work that suited me. But no, I think that was kind of the downfall initially of like my first go at it was I didn't have customers and I was not particularly good at going and finding them. By the time we started OPA in 2013, we kind of been around the block a little bit more. We had the military stuff under our belt, and I went hard at the military. And I would say this, like, a lot of people are scared of doing military work, but if you take a little bit of time and just play their, I don't want to say stupid, but they are stupid sometimes, games, like just learn their paperwork, like learn how to do the documentation, learn how to just give them what they're asking for. There's money in it. There's good money in it.
Yeah.
Even for small shops. And so because OPA kind of spawned off immediately after we all were, the three of us worked for a military dedicated shop, that was very easy for us to roll over into. And so I kind of went out and I figured out how to use the DLA, which is the logistics agency's website, so that I could bid on work. I learned how to submit the bids. We set up our AS 9100 manual, and just we played the games. I mean, we tally, ticked all the boxes for them, which is what they want to see. And so that's kind of how we started out initially, was military work. And that really carried us through the first like 3 or 4 years of OPA, until I started pivoting more towards commercial and just job shopping, local job shopping.
Hmm. That's one thing, and I've already done another episode on this too, but I don't think I can reiterate it enough for anybody setting out on their own to start their own shop. If your goal is to just be a job shop and get work, make sure you have a game plan for that, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm a good machinist. The work will just come." And it doesn't ever seem to work that way. Like, you got to wear that hat. You got to find a way to
Yeah.
market it, sell it, get work somehow, some way. You got to figure out how to get work in your shop. So just being good at running machines, it takes more than that. So
Yeah.
that was
I
a good
think
lesson.
there's a really good book that I would tell anyone starting their own company to read. I don't know if I even call it a book. It's more of a brochure pamphlet type. But it's called The E Myth Revisited. And it talks about there's three personalities basically that are required to run a business. And it's the technician, the administrator, and the entrepreneur. And there need to be those three personalities present for any company to succeed. And that most small businesses start out with the technician mentality. It's the guy who is the machinist who says, "Well, geez, I can run the shop better than my boss can," or my boss is billing the customer $200 an hour, but I'm only getting $50 an hour, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
That's the mentality. And then the technician goes out and starts his own company and confronts exactly what you're saying. Like, they don't know how to be a salesman. They don't necessarily know how to do the administration. They don't know how to file their taxes at the end of the year. There's so much that goes on with that. And that's actually why I brought on partners from kind of OPA, was because I thought, man, I know I'm definitely in that technician mentality with a little bit of the admin, and I'm an eternal optimist, which kind of covers the entrepreneurial side. Like, I always think that things are going to be awesome, and so that kind of helps me there. So I kind of had pieces of it, but like, my one partner, he was an accountant. That was his bread and butter, was accounting. So he really helped me out where I was lacking. And so I would really, yeah, I'd urge people, you know, you need to be a salesman. You need to have that, and just be honest with yourself. Like, know where you stand. If you are just a technician, like, that's fine. Know that you're a technician, but know that you're going to need to figure something out to be that salesman, um,
Hmm.
or whatever it might be, or the bookkeeper, or whatever role. But being a technician alone and only having that personality trait and starting your own company, you are pretty much doomed to fail.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So we started discussing it, right? You mentioned you have a DN dual spindle live
Yeah,
mill lathe.
yeah,
So
my lathe. Yep.
what else do you currently have in your shop?
So I've got an Akuma Genos M560B, which was my first purchase of this new generation of machines that I have. I think it's a 2023 or so. It might have been made in 2022, but pretty new. It does have the older generation controller. It has P300
Hmm.
instead of the P500 now. Um, but really great machine. That thing's a workhorse. About approximately 40 by 20 table, 15,000 RPM, and just I mean heavy as the day is long. I think the thing weighs 18,000 pounds. I mean
Yeah, yeah,
it's good, you know. And I love the OSP. I love the open API layer on the OSP. It lets me do a lot of cool stuff. So I got that. Then I picked up that Haas Super Mini Mill. It's the second generation of the mini mills. I had previously had a mini mill. When I first went out on my own, and they have made some incredible changes to it. I mean, it is still definitely a lightweight machine. I've never in my life had my riggers when they're moving my machines around. I remember we needed to scoot that mill out of the way to move the Akuma in, and I remember Rick hollering at the driver, and he's like, "Grab the pallet jack, and we'll just move this one." And I've never ever had a machine light enough to be moved by a pallet jack, and literally that's all they did was they grab a pallet jack and scoot it around. But for what it is, it's a great machine. It's a bargain, and they have them pretty much in stock and ready to go. So I have that, and it's a solid machine. And then I bought the Doosan, which
hmm
yeah, I probably yeah. I voiced my opinions to you of my Doosan, but it gets the job done. Yeah, we won't do. I mean, if you're looking for a Doosan, like talk to yourselves and talk to people. Um, and it's got it on paper it's got sub spindle, it's got live tooling. It's got everything. Yeah, I wish I'd done some things different on it, but it's a good machine and it does the job, and it holds great tolerances and that. And then most recently, I picked up my 5-axis, and I have the M560V 5AX, which is it's vaguely based. I don't know why they call it an M560 because I think it's actually more closely based off of the 56 that they have.
No,
But
well,
it
it
yeah,
is the same platform. Like the base casting is the same
yeah.
as your M560. It does have like a riser on it though
Yeah.
to
I was gonna say it's a
accommodate the
lot taller. It's a lot taller. I thought they'd be the
yeah.
same size. It's a lot longer and taller.
Hmm.
But yeah, I picked that one up. It's an Akuma as well. And also I don't know if I was happy that it had the P300 controller as well. So I didn't have a bunch of different generations controllers. And that one was a demo model. Cody, our salesman with Hartwig, he kind of knew that that was my next machine to be buying, and he kind of knows how I work. That I ask for a quote, I get the numbers in my head, and then I ponder on it for weeks or months sometimes, and then at just one point, I make the decision, yes or no. So he kind of knew that was in the back of my head, and so when that demo model came up, I was actually looking at the 465AX, so the little sister of it. But when that came up, I mean, I got a deep discount, and he came running into my shop. I always tell people he came running in like Charlie with his golden ticket, with that demo flyer in his hand, and he knew, like, I mean, that I pulled the trigger, and I think we had the paperwork signed later that afternoon. Like I called in, I got the banker, all squared away, and we were they I think the banker had to wait for the serial number on the machine, like because we did everything so fast. Like that's what was holding it up, was no one knew the serial number on the machine. So yeah, that was my most recent one, and then when that opened up the 5-axis work, I really was surprised with how things changed with that 5-axis machine. And our next one is we're probably going to try to swap out the Haas for another 5-axis machine.
Nice. Um, and what are you looking at for that?
Well, good question. We're kind of looking across the spectrum. Like I've reached out to everybody, all my salesmen, and I'd really like something. I love my Akuma, but there are two things I'd like to change on the next machine. Like I'm glad I have the Akuma, but because I have the Akuma, I really want a smaller platen. I think a lot of people when they buy 5-axis machines, they think bigger is better. 9 times out of 10, that big platin's going to be in your way more than it's helping you. I don't think
Mhm.
people realize that it's like when you got a 20 or 22 or 23-inch platen on that machine, you got to work past that thing every time you're coming down on a 90 degree or something like that. And I think people overlook that. I would prefer something in the 16 inches or lower. I mean, honestly, even like a 12-inch platen would probably make me super happy because 85% of the 5-axis work I do is in kind of a 6-inch cube. Um, Now, occasionally I do need that big old Akuma where I have an 18-inch diameter something or other that's 15 inches tall. And yeah, I need the Akuma, but I've got the Akuma. So I'd really like something smaller. Also, one of the drawbacks, not just on the Akuma, but on a lot of machines, is you don't get the symmetrical swing on either the A or B axis, depending on how yours is oriented. On
Mhm.
my machine, it's an A axis because it follows the X. So like I think my Akuma, I believe, has like 20 to negative 110 is the swing range. And that's pretty common. I mean, I know Mazak, the Variaxis 600 is about the same. They're all kind of in that same realm. But yeah, if you can get a full swing that's like a plus or minus 100 or even plus or minus 90 would be enough for me. So yeah, I'd really like something that swings both ways. I've only bumped up against it about twice in the 3 months that I've had the machine, where it's just like, I'm limited. Like I can't do what I need to do because of my swing. But I mean, it is something I like to change. That's what I'm looking at. So because of those requirements, I'm of course looking at the Akuma, the MU 4000.
Yeah.
I think they're getting me a quote on. I'd love to get a quote, and I hope they'll get it. I know it's probably not the right fit for me, but the MU S600B. It's really made for more mass manufacturing, but it's just a cool footprint. Like I love the idea of how small that thing is. Um,
Mhm.
I don't think I'll be able to afford it, but
Yeah,
it's fun to dream.
they're
Um,
surprisingly expensive for
yeah,
being as
yeah, yeah.
small as they
No, and
are.
they're definitely made for, I mean, Mercedes probably wants to put one in their shop. When they're making tens of thousands or something.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I'm looking at those two from Akuma. We've talked about doing a table on table, either for the Akuma or something else. That has its pros and cons. But then we've also are currently stirring in Makino, their D200 and D300 are kind of in that envelope, and then Hermle, their C12. I got a quote on that, and we're probably going to go try to see one either late in September or into October. We're going to visit all those companies, and then the Matsuras. They're kind of lower on my list. Honestly, the Makino, if we can find an Akuma, that'd be cool. Because then I have to change controllers. Like I said, I love the OSP. But Makino's definitely in the mix, and Hermle's still in the mix. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, the MU 4000 has what you're looking for, but
Yes.
I don't, the Platin's still,
I think 16 or 17.
yeah, it's still pretty good size.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it is squared off, like their platinum squared off. And so yeah, that is my one drawback to the 4000.
mhm.
But frankly, it's like Akuma, I would definitely say has the inside track in my mind, just because it's so nice. I mean, and this is true of any brand, whether you're an all Mazak shop or all Mori shop or whatever, or DMG shop. Um, you know, the uniformity of your controllers, it really helps a lot. And so there's definitely like I'd put up with a few more issues, like maybe a little bit too big of a platen or something like that, in order to stick with my OSP.
Well,
Because it makes everything a lot easier.
yeah,
It also
especially with
helps.
your
Yeah, go ahead.
posts and your cam
Exactly.
software and stuff.
And it streamlines, like, your techs. You can hire, your tech to come in and work on all you hire them for a day, and they can do the routine maintenance on all your machines in one fell swoop,
Mhm.
versus bringing in a tech from Akuma, bringing in a tech from Mazak, bringing in a tech from Doosan. There's definitely some economies of scale as far as the kind of thing goes. But yeah,
For sure.
we're kind of all over the place, and I'm sure if you talk to any of my salesmen, they'd be frustrated because I keep waffling and eh, thinking about every possibility. I mean, like I say, we're looking at everything from strapping a Haas trunnion on my super mini mill all the way up to, a German made Hermle C12 or something like that, and everything in between. So we're kind of all over the place.
Yeah, Hermela has some nice machines.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah. And they know it and they charge for it. That's for sure. I got my quotes for that, but they are very much still in play because the work is there for sure. So,
Well, that's really
yeah,
cool.
we'll see what happens.
So, what cam software are you using?
So well, I used to. I mean, I guess I still technically have it. I do have a spree that I tend to use for my higher end stuff, but frankly, I have not used that in a long time. I was using Feature Cam and I switched over to Fusion 360's built-in cam software. I still use SolidWorks for my CAD, but I went with Fusion 360, and it's got its pros and cons. But as we might touch on a bit more later. I've tried to streamline. My shop I very much set up to be efficient, not so much with my machining processes. Like, I'm not trying to squeeze every second out of a runtime. But I do try to be as efficient as possible in the overall job and product realization phase. So I think there's a lot that people don't think about when it's like, okay, a model comes in. Well, you got to download it. You got to put it in your file system. You got to, verify that everything matches up with the print. Then you program it. Then you run it. Then you got to do inspection. There's got to be an inspection report created, and that might involve typing or data entry and stuff. And then you got to do your bookkeeping side of it. And you got to make your work order throughout that whole process. So that everything's documented. There's a lot that goes on with that. So I've tried to streamline kind of all that ancillary stuff. So the administrative side of it. So like I say, I might waste time on the machine because I'm cutting air for a little bit, or I move, like on my fifth axis. I always move my cutter home before I rotate or tilt my axis at all. And that's a waste of time, but it's for what I do, where it's like, okay, my cutter came to the right place. I'm going to let it run. I'll put it on op stop, and I'm going to go look at another machine because I need to set it up. I feel more confident in it doing that. So, like, I'm not looking to do that, but part of that was obviously streamlining the programming. Fusion 360, and I'm not saying they're the only ones that have this, but their templates that they have where you can build your own template. If you define them right, man, you can basically machine, you can just drag and drop these templates onto a part and probably have 90% of your part machined without you typing in a single number. It's click, 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 and done. And so that really, I don't know that Fusion 360 is an amazing program, but it suits my needs very well.
Have you run into any issues with what you're doing as far
Oh
as
yeah.
it being cloud based?
No issues with cloud based. So in fairness, though, I do not work off the cloud a lot. That was one of my frustrations early on, and it actually caused me to stop using it for a while before I figured it out. Um, I move everything though offline, so you can, when you're done with something. So basically, I only use their cloud for my active jobs. So I run everything, I program it. It's accessible from all of my computers, even when I'm at home or whatever. Then when I'm done, I archive it and I drop that archive file into my file system that keeps track of my job numbers, and that's all very controlled, and it's I know where everything is in that, and so then it moves off the cloud. So my Fusion at any time probably only has 5 or 6 jobs ever in its cloud, and so that's kind of the way that I've streamed.
Got it. Yeah. And I've noticed that anytime I've been over at your shop visiting, you are, for being a small shop, and this is another one of those things that I think gets overlooked. It's systems, and it's not necessarily just the
Yes.
systems that are running in your machine, right? It's not just your program and just it's everything else, all the ancillary things, and
Yep.
all that needs to run seamless. And at the end of the day, cycle time is only a small part of
Hmm.
the total package of systems that it takes from cradle to grave when it comes to doing a part and getting it out the door.
Yeah, and I think that's often overlooked. I went to IMTS last year because I knew I was buying, a lot of new machinery. I thought, well, if I'm going to go, that's a good year to do it. And it was really, I mean, almost frustrating when people, you go to a booth and they'd be like, well, what are you trying to do? And it's like, well, I need to automate a lot. I'm a smaller shop. I need to be, as much as possible, I need to be solving problems and setting up parts, doing what I do best. And everyone's like, well, buy a robot, buy when they hear automation, they think, robot or parts changer, or the mechanical process of automation. But in reality, it's like what really has saved me. It's like, I mean, my bandsaw, buying an auto feeding bandsaw, that saved me hours. Moving my inspections onto my machines and doing, using the probes more and stuff like that, and streamlining that saved me more time.
Mhm.
Working my ERP to coordinate better with my my bookkeeping software so that I only am entering data one time. Like it's those kinds of things. That's the automation that I need. I mean, you've even seen it. I have a little robot vacuum that vacuums my shop for me every night. It's like
Mhm.
it sounds stupid, but it's like, yeah, that the $300 invested in Bob, we call him Bob, in Bob going around, like that saves me or my guys an hour, maybe 2 hours every week, doing that. And so it's those kind of things. It's like you say, it's everything around running the part. That's where I've tried to streamline.
Yeah, and I think there's a lesson there to be learned for anybody that currently owns a shop or, wants to grow. And I talk about it myself. I talk about technology. And once again, everybody thinks, oh, he's talking about technology. He means buying new machines all the time.
Hmm.
You need to buy a new machine with the newest technology and know that maybe it's a presetter somewhere. And it doesn't even
Yeah,
have to be some high-end Heimer unit. Maybe it's just a fancy height gauge, right? Or there's lots of examples of technology that can streamline your processes that aren't crazy expensive, but are going to save you
yeah.
time down the road.
Well, like what I don't know if I ever showed it to you, but my inspection program that I use, um, where I moved as much inspection as we can onto the machines. So we calibrate their probes every week so that they're calibrated, and then we use that for kind of anywhere that it's a plus or minus five. We use those probes for the inspection, and I sat down. We were on vacation in Hawaii actually when I did it, but I sat down for half a day during a rainstorm because we couldn't go out, and I wrote a little PowerShell script that allowed me to push one button at my server, and it would go onto each machine and grab the text file that I had created, during the inspection, and it would serialize it. It would figure out which job folder it was supposed to be in. It would grab all the data, put it in a really nice, looking spreadsheet that looks pretty and has everything, crap all that data out there, and then create a PDF of that. It would print one to the printer to give to the customer, and it would park another one in its job folder. And that cost me literally nothing other than a half a day of programming to do it. And yet that saved me, I don't know, 5, maybe even 10 hours a week of my time personally, because I did most of the inspection work. That was a huge savings. So I think that, yeah, like you say, people think when you say, oh, you need to automate or you need to streamline or use technology, everyone thinks, oh, that's going to cost me money. There's so much free technology nowadays, or relatively inexpensive technology that you can just apply to your needs. That's going to save you so much time and effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, that wraps up part one of my conversation with Brady from O.P.A. Be sure to tune in next week for part two, where we'll dive into how Brady keeps his spindles turning and making money by leveraging platforms like Xometry and some of the lessons he's learned along the way. In the meantime, don't forget to follow me on TikTok and Instagram for more behind the scenes content and machining insights. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on Machine Tool Maniacs.